Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and yes, I'm sitting down with the mic in my hand, not because I'm trying to be an ESPN commentator letting you know how the New York Mets are going to be the best team in baseball this coming season. No, not that. My mic arm broke, so in case you're wondering why I'm going to sit here for like almost 20 minutes talking about The Witcher 3 like this, it's not because I'm trying to imitate my favorite commentators on ESPN. Now, with that useless information out of the way, let's talk about something a little bit more useful to you all, like, The Witcher 3 and its next-gen update. It's finally coming out. A lot of people have been excited for this one, and as CD Projekt Red has peeled the layers back, we've learned more and more about it, and it seems a little bit bigger than many of us were expecting. Now, this one arrives as a free update, so if you already own The Witcher 3, this will be something that's a part of the package. They originally had on sale over on GOG, the Game of the Year edition, which comes with all the expansions, the full base game, and all of the free updates that have come since the launch of the game for like $10. So this game is insanely cheap. Now adding the next-gen update on top, I had a chance to test out the photo mode, the brand new quest line, the new gameplay options, and also just revisiting this game for the first time since 2015 because I really haven't replayed it in full since then. And I'm excited to talk about it because I believe that The Witcher 3 is the gold standard of modern AAA RPGs. A lot of people think that means it's my favorite, and I understand why because it's high praise, but really what it means is I hope that my personal favorite developers who have made my favorite RPGs like BioWare and Bethesda Game Studios take a look at the level of effort and quality that was put out with The Witcher 3 and how it was supported with free updates, and they follow in their footsteps. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here, you're into CD Projekt Red content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot on the way. I have a Cyberpunk 2077 re-review coming down the line in a few days, I'd imagine. We're still doing a little bit more of the playthrough, and it's going to be covering all of the updates that have come to that game. It's going to be the game's 2-year anniversary. It just passed it a couple of days ago. So yeah, it's a good time to revisit it. We're going to have that on the channel. We're also going to do a So I Tried Playing video for the new Witcher 3 update we're talking about today, for more of a Let's Play style format for those of you who prefer that, because that series has been blowing up, so thank you for the support there. Anyway, long story short, we have a lot to talk about, and that's not accounting for the Phantom Liberty news that I still have yet to get to. That's my fault. I've just been really busy with reviews because we're also playing High on Life. Anyway, just a brief content update there as we round out what is going to be my final week in the office, but we're going to end on a strong note. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support. Sorry for the delay. Let's get into The Witcher 3. It's great to be back, man. I mean, when I was going through some of my old PlayStation hours, because PlayStation has the clock there, the first time I ever played The Witcher was over on the PS4, and I saw I put like almost 150 hours into the game, which was way more than I thought it was, because during my first ever playthrough, that was interrupted by Arkham Knight, which I love Arkham Knight. I think that game is sick, so that completely took me away from The Witcher until that was done, and I almost 100%ed that game, and then I went back to The Witcher. So for some reason in my head, I thought my hour count was much lower, but this game is so easy to get sucked back into, and I think it's because one thing we don't talk about a lot across Cyberpunk or The Witcher when we talk about those games respectively and what they do right is I think the performances. I just think the voice acting here is fantastic. I think the facial animations and the way characters talk and interact and move around scenes, it just feels so believable. And Cyberpunk did that well in a first-person setting, whereas The Witcher, I forgot how great it looks. And it's especially impressive because of the amount of dialogue in this game, the amount of questing you're doing, the amount of content that's there. Normally, that quality bar will just lower by default, but going back into this with the next-gen update, I was just impressed with how great the game looks. I mean, I don't bust out photo mode ever. I did, of course, for this video. Congrats, you're seeing on screen the first time I busted out photo mode, probably since, I'd say, Ghost of Tsushima. And it's such a looker still to this day. It's hard to believe this is a 2015 game. For comparison, you had other 2015 games like Bloodborne, Arkham Knight was one I mentioned, as well as Fallout 4. So it wasn't like a crazy great year for graphics, but I mean, The Witcher 3, for again, all it did, it felt like there were no sacrifices. That's again why I call it the gold standard. Now, when it comes to the next gen update, I don't think photo mode's going to be what lights your fire. I think the new gameplay options will, however. Now, if you're on PC, there are still graphical enhancements that you should be aware of because CD Projekt Red has called it Ultra Plus. So you can load up the game, go to your settings, and there's ray tracing ultra, and you will see as you scroll through all the video settings, Ultra Plus is now a thing. So yes, even if you have this on PC, it's not like consoles are just catching up to where we were on ultra settings over on PC. This is something that can beef this thing up even more, which is really exciting because it does look tremendous. I played it using my 3080 and it looks really good. There were a couple of skips throughout, so I probably had to adjust a few things in there, but overall it was running well enough. But when things started to pick up, we chugged a little bit, but it stayed relatively at a solid 60. And one thing I did notice was actually something CD Projekt Red pointed out, which they talked a bit about in their Red stream promoting the next gen update, that you'll see things in the draw distance a little bit more like smokestacks. And that is true. And so tracking down content in a more organic manner was something I was doing. I was knocking off little checklist objectives throughout the map. And I just thought it was neat that what they said ended up being true in a very natural way. But the gameplay options that I think will matter the most to you all are the camera changes. So now you have camera changes for exploration, for combat, and for when you're on horseback. You can have them either on a default setting or you can have them close up. The game, when you load in the next gen update, will do all of this in a close range. And this to me was nice because you immediately got a different feel for the game. I personally kept the close camera for both combat as well as horseback. I think it looks really good in horseback, but exploration, as you'll see the back and forth, I prefer the camera pulled out, especially because there is just so much going on in the world, and when it's close up, it just didn't feel right for me. But the option is there. And perhaps the biggest gameplay change that you'll care about the most is one that no longer interrupts the flow of combat. And that's using quick sign casting. So originally in The Witcher 3, what you'd do is you'd slow down action, you'd bring up this radial wheel that'd be right in the center of the screen. It would break up the action, break up the immersion. Now it's as simple as holding a trigger and just having a bunch of face buttons change on the bottom right corner of the screen. You'll have all of your signs there that have been assigned, pardon the pun, and you'll fire away. It's that simple. And it does make combat a little more fluid. You can still slow down time if you so desire, but I personally really like this change. It makes The Witcher's combat a little less, I don't like to use the word janky for it, but there's already a methodical nature to the preparation with the alchemy, with studying your bestiary and making sure you know the weaknesses of enemies, which I did like that portion of it. But then when combat's slowing down in the middle of things and you're really plotting and thinking, this gives it just overall a better flow here. And so I really did appreciate this change, probably more than anything, because again, I think it's just a feel factor. Sometimes you can't really put a name to it. It's just obtaining game feel, and that's exactly what this is. It just removes an element from the combat cycle that I think was a little more obtuse compared to everything else and enhances your immersion a little bit, which was cool. And I was reminded of how gory the combat is. I mean, some fools pulled up to me in a bar and I was chopping off arms, cutting them in half, chopping off heads. And I forgot just how gory The Witcher is. I mean, it goes pretty unhinged at certain points, whether you see people hanging from trees, there are corpses everywhere from a griffin hunting them down. I mean, it's insane just how bloody this game is. And to me, I like that stuff. I think it adds to the mature nature of the game. Cross progression has been added. So let's say you have The Witcher 3 on Switch, which is a fantastic port, as we know now. That's something I also covered here on the channel. Then what could happen is you could play it on your PC and it's time to take the game on the go. You could do a cross save and load it on your Switch and then play it on the go there, or Steam Deck to Xbox. I mean, it's all over the place. And I think this is a fantastic feature. It's something I always complimented with Cyberpunk 2077 when they added it in, although your only portable option there was probably Steam Deck, and that's really not super ideal. But the idea that you can go across systems if you own the game in multiple places and continue to access it is really nice, because I remember there was a time where the only game that I could think of that was really doing that was on a single player RPG level, was Divinity Original Sin 2. They had it where they made the Switch port and then you could carry your Switch save into your PC save, and that was really, really nice to have, because that game is long, super long, and it's super replayable. So to chip in any hours whenever you can and just be efficient with that time is nice. And so CD Projekt Red is allowing that here with The Witcher 3. But perhaps the one that most people were curious about is going to be the brand new questline that ties into the Netflix series. Now, I don't want to show too much of this one just because I know it's the only piece of main content here, so I'm going to avoid showing much beyond the initial conversation, just some combat segments, and that's really it. But it's a good quest line. You have to be level 15, and it's right near the Hangman's Tree. So right when you enter Velen, you're going to have access to this quest line. But if you are starting a brand new game, then you are going to probably be under-leveled for this one. And depending on how much side content you do before heading to Velen. But overall, it was a good quest line. And I have to say, one thing I noticed that I did want to talk about was Doug Cockle's performance with this version of Geralt. You have to remember, it's been about 7 years since this man has performed as Geralt. You know, of course, Thronebreaker, Witcher Tale withstanding. It's been a while since we've heard Witcher 3 Geralt. And I think that performance by Doug Cockle is fantastic. Just that gravelly nature and how he captures it in his chest is fantastic. What you'll notice when you do this quest line is if you have an ear for it, Doug sounds very different. It's still gravelly, and there are moments where you hear that Witcher 3 Doug Cockle, but there are a lot of times you hear the gravelly nature coming from his throat rather than his chest. And this is something that you will be able to spot the difference, and you can tell it's been a while since he's played as Geralt. Is it a major distraction? No. Is it bad? Definitely not. It's just something you're going to recognize, and it's good to pay attention to because we know the Witcher remake is on the way. We don't know if Doug's going to be back, but I imagine if CD Projekt Red is, 2% smart, they will obviously bring him back. And this could be the type of performance that you expect. I hope he's not going to put too much stress on his throat because with a gravelly character like that can deteriorate pretty quickly over time, and certain parts of certain lines are going to give out more than others. But I digress. Just something I wanted to point out. As for the quality of the content there, it's good. But something I did want to point out there with that quest line. So again, level 15, easy to find right when you get into Velen, near the Hangman's Tree as I showed on screen. One thing I also wanted to point out is if you die during a particular battle, you'll actually see a unique death animation, which is something that I don't believe the rest of The Witcher 3, to my memory, had. At first, when I died, I thought, oh, well, this was a tough fight. Maybe this was intentional. I was also a little underleveled. Now, this is skippable, so if you do die a bunch of times here, that's okay. Don't worry. It's not going to force you to rewatch it over and over. Callisto Protocol, I'm looking at you. So don't worry about any of that, but just something I recognized there that I did want to point out to all of you. Otherwise, they've incorporated some mods. So these are things like 4K textures, models, highly detailed monsters. These are more visual things, but CD Projekt Red does directly call this out in their patch 4.0 highlights on the main menu. Those are really the unique bells and whistles. Otherwise, it was just really nice to go back to this game, to remember how triumphant it was, right? Because what happened was CD Projekt Red, I thought, already had a triumphant game in The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, but that came out the same year as Skyrim. And not that any fantasy RPG wouldn't stand a chance in the vicinity of Skyrim, but just the public consciousness was consumed by this one, and I don't think people had room for The Witcher 2, even if it came out earlier. Most people's eyes were set on Skyrim. So here with The Witcher 3, to again see how they went head-to-head with Bethesda Game Studios, it was just one of those things where you could have seen history repeating itself, but they came out on top, rightfully so. It was a pretty big wake-up call for Bethesda. Didn't work out with 76. And so seeing that correlation there and remembering that victory story is really important to the history of this company. And it's kind of what propelled the hype of Cyberpunk 2077. It was just like, man, they made a banging RPG, one of the best ever, and they're making a new IP. That's tremendously exciting. So make no mistake here that this is a game worth going back to. The polish is good here, and the new content probably won't speak to you, but there's enough bells and whistles that if it's been a while, like if you're me, where it's been 2015, 2016 during that DLC expansion period, that you haven't really played this game, this is a good time to dive back in and see what it's worth to you. And if you've been skipping out on The Witcher 3 especially, I think it's a great time to give it a shot. One thing we don't talk a lot about, and I mentioned this in our So I Tried Playing video for the vanilla Witcher 3, was that, this game is very checklisty, and the same thing with Cyberpunk, but I think with The Witcher 3, sometimes I butt heads with it more, where Cyberpunk, because the loop is completing gigs and reporting back to the fixer now, thanks to updates that have come out, I feel like it's a more sensible loop for V as a character based off what you're doing in the world. Whereas with The Witcher, makes sense knocking stuff off the bounty board, but having stuff listed on the map, like, you know, your monster dens, your marauder stashes, and so on and so forth, yeah, you could do with a little bit less of those, but fortunately, one of the things they added was the map filters. So this is another quality of life enhancement that you can enjoy. So if you get really overwhelmed with the amount of question marks that pepper your map, which certainly I think will happen, just don't worry, you can knock those off, whether by completing them or by filtering your map, and you can take a breath that way. But there is a substantial amount of content. I talked about at the beginning of the video how my first playthrough was 100 plus hours, and that's probably excluding like another 100 hours worth of content. I mean, there's a lot here. That's not including completing all of Gwent, all of the expansions. It's disgusting. There's a lot here. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd say go out, give it a try. Of course, give it a try. I would have said that without the next gen update, but now's a good chance for that refresh with that injection of new content, some good quality life enhancements to see if it's up your alley, because a lot of people do love it and do want to return to it. But let's be honest, a lot of people have bounced off this game for a while, and a lot of folks don't think it's as good as people claim it to be. So what I'd say is go in with an open mind. Know that they haven't changed anything so substantial that if you really, really butted heads with it, I don't know if that will change, but maybe it'll finally click with you. So give it a shot. Again, it's a free update to an already amazing RPG, and I've enjoyed my time with it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of here. I'm going to go rest my arm because I've been, holding this thing for a while now. So let me know your thoughts on The Witcher 3 and the next gen update, as well as if you plan on playing it down below. With that, take great care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.